Hello, hello, and welcome. Want to say thank you so much to Souls of Duende and our presenting partners, Lincoln Center, for that amazing cultural offering. It was fabulous. Hi, and welcome to the Mayoral Forum on Culture and Arts. I know that we all know that there's so many things going on right now, and there's a lot that we're all navigating. So we really, really appreciate you allocating one of your most valuable resources, which is your time, to be here with us. I am Melanie Green. I am an artist and also director of programs at New Yorkers for Culture and Arts. We are a cultural advocacy organization working to ensure a vibrant future of culture and arts for all New Yorkers. I am coming to you currently from the stolen land of the Choctaw and Chickasaw peoples. I am a dark-skinned Black woman, and I have curly tendrils cascading from the crown of my head, and I'm wearing a rose-colored jumpsuit. And I use she, her pronouns. So tonight we have the pleasure of having ASL interpretation as well as closed captioning if you are within the Zoom platform. And you can, if you see live transcript at the bottom of the frame, you can click on that to see closed captioning. We also have the chat open tonight, and we want to encourage you to be respectful, no hate speech, please, and just be kind, pretty much. We all know what we need to do in the Zoom chat, right? But we do welcome thoughtful questions, impressions, suggestions on the topics discussed. I want to give a quick shout out to New Yorkers for Culture and Arts team for organizing the efforts around this evening, including Lori Berg, Lucy Sexton, Tara Sheena, Regine Peters, our producing partners, FSG, our media partners, BRIC Community Media and All Arts, participating organizations, which will be listed in the chat, both in the Zoom sphere and also YouTube. Hey, YouTube folks. And also want to give a shout out to our amazing Mayoral Forum host committee, also who will be listed in the chat. So tonight we have the amazing moderators, Luis Miranda Jr. and Anna Glass. Luis is the chairman of the Broadway League Latino Audience Development Program, Viva Broadway, and the chairperson of Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance. Anna Glass is the executive director of Dance Theater of Harlem and serves on the Tony Nominating Committee and the board of directors for the Association of Performing Artists Professionals. And we're so excited to have them here. Before we get started, just want to also let you know that we will be hosting a series of forums throughout this month and next month. We'll include more information about that in the chat. It will be for different city council districts throughout the boroughs. So please stay tuned for that. And now, without further ado, welcome Luis and Anna. Welcome.
Thank you, Melanie. Hello and welcome to the Mayoral Forum on Arts, Culture, and Community, hosted by New Yorkers for Culture and Arts and the many cultural partners that are part of our host committee and beyond. The full list, as Melanie said, of cultural organizations and individuals will be shared in the chat.
Welcome, my name is Luis Miranda. I am thrilled to be here with Anna Glass, Executive Director of Dance Theater of Harlem. We're going to begin the accessibility check-ins and give you a brief visual description.
I am an African-American woman, light-skinned complexion, wearing glasses, a burnt orange top, a gold necklace. I've got a blue background and floral arrangements behind me. And I use the pronouns she and her.
And I am a Puerto Rican New Yorker, aging by the minute, entering the new world after 13 months of being in my house and being able then to create this background that has my favorite books, my favorite picture of my wife, and I am wearing a great suit and a shirt with different shades of green.
Thank you, Luis, for that description. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted cultural organizations, cultural workers, and artists. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the arts and cultural sector generated $110 billion in economic activity in New York City, with a workforce of over 300,000. For the city to bounce back, it needs a strong cultural sector. And tonight, We are excited to hear from mayoral candidates about their views on the arts.
And I'll start by reminding everyone that I am on, and we are, if you are in New York City, in Lenape-Hogan territory, that it's now the city of New York. And this evening, we're going to be asking candidates questions from New Yorkers for Culture and Arts candidate questionnaire. They will have 90 seconds to respond, and time allowing, we will do follow-up questions with each candidate. I see that Anna is frozen. So we're figure out to sort of get her back on. In the meantime, I'll let you all know that the candidates have seen the questionnaire. They have posted responses to them, and they're all at the New Yorkers for Culture and Art website, ny4ca.org. Let me also tell you the chat is open, so we encourage candidates to converse with guests. While we cannot promise to get to all the questions that you post on the chat, we encourage the discussion, and we will continue to monitor both the Zoom and YouTube. Anna?
Sorry about that, everybody. Live. This is live theater. Thank you, Luis, so much for jumping in for me. I am in Michigan right now, and my internet dropped out of all things. So thank you, everybody, for your patience. So just to continue on, we'd like for you all to be respectful with the comments that you post. We also want you to know that the order of the candidates and the questions they were asked and selected in random order to ensure fairness. So we're going to get started. And Luis, we are actually going to change things up a little bit. And we're going to start with Abe Smith.
We are. And we actually have a question for her. Data shows that neighborhoods with cultural assets have improved outcomes in everything from education to aging, to community well-being and safety. Yet, nonprofit cultural groups often lack resources for long-term stable locations in the city's fluctuating real estate market. Artists and cultural workers need affordable live workspaces. What is your plan, Abe, for creating health stable communities? How do you envision enlivening vacant commercial and city-owned spaces for this sector and for the city?
Thank you very much for asking me that question, Luis Miranda. My name is Abe Smith. I am a he, and I'm running for mayor, city of New York, as Smithy for mayor. This question is very important to me because I am also a practicing professional artist. And looking at what happened for the past 13 months, I noticed a couple of things. And I realized that because physical space was moved online, which is not new to artists, but the main thing is they were not paying rent, and they were not paying a couple of things that normally takes a huge amount from what they normally pay or whatever. So they were able to increase their output and do a lot. Now, to keep this going and to address the issue that most artists face, which is rent, I plan to introduce 3D industrial printing technology for architectural purposes into the city. This could be used to print skyscrapers. But before I will do that, there are certain things that I plan to address. First is what I call soft infrastructure, which has got to do with our laws and our admins. Once that is addressed, I'll be able to bypass the issue of zoning and say, listen, I want to address issue of space, light, and other things, and rearrange space. Plan is I want to build more affordable houses. I want to solve the problem of rent. If people in New York City, not just artists, everyone is working to pay rent now. But if rent is brought down in a way which will be done if I start building more affordable houses and if I bring in 3D printing technology to print more houses, it means people will have more money to spend. They will now go back to what we used to do in the 50s, which is collect artworks. They will now have more money to enjoy culture. They'll have more money to even donate towards nonprofit art organizations. It could be citywide, it could be local, it could be statewide, because they are no longer working for rent. But my point here is building more affordable houses and bringing down rent will solve a lot of issues, because then people have.
And let me ask you, and thank you for the response.
Yes.
What about cultural spaces in particular? We understand the housing, that it's so important for
Yes.
many artists, but what about workspace, space for our dance groups, our cultural groups in our neighborhoods?
I have two ways of solving that problem when it comes to workspace. One will be to continue the way we are, which means encourage some landlords that host artists, give them some credit to keep on hosting artists by creating workspace. Another one will be to bring in what I call bedroom tax, because there are certain landlords in the city that have buildings and properties that are empty. They bought those buildings because they could afford to buy more, and they're keeping it empty because they're waiting for interest to go up. Well, what I'll tell them is, I am introducing bedroom tax, which means if you have a space that is not a living room or kitchen, but is big enough to host a footing and a table, which is what most artists need to work with, then I will tax them. Apart from that, I will give them a lot of encouragement to host artists, because artists need creative spaces. But also, I will create a system whereby I'll bring in what I call big government. It's the only way that artists will function. I don't want artists to be disposed of. If I say I'm going to do what is called people organization investment, PPE or whatever. But big government has to be involved. We have to provide some incentives, things to encourage artists. Also, I'll create a work and teach system, which means
thank you.
Artists will not only work in their studios. Yes.
The 90 seconds are up. Thank you very much for sharing your ideas, Anna.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Luis. Now we are going to bring up Paperboy Love Prince.
Hello.
Hi.
Paper, yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing
We're
great.
not quite seeing video yet. Are you seeing me?
Yes, I am seeing you.
Okay.
If you could give us 2 minutes, we'd be ready to hop on video.
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot, and then we'll bring you back in a little bit later in the segment, okay? So next, we're going to bring up Catherine Garcia. Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
How are you? Great to see
Thank you so much for we're grooving with the improv. We're arts and culture sector. Zoom
Absolutely.
has just been all crazy.
Well, I'm glad your internet is stable now.
Thank you. I'm so happy to see you. So here is your question, Catherine. Healthcare is a pressing issue for individual artists, cultural workers, small cultural groups without resources for major coverage plans. This impacts disabled artists, workers, and organizations enormously. In addition, many people are experiencing disabilities after suffering from COVID-19. And in communities that are hardest hit by COVID, health outlets are closing. So for instance, in Brownsville and Brooklyn, there have been recent closure announcements of a long-standing family and women's health clinic. What is your plan to address healthcare needs for the city's many communities, especially in arts and culture?
Thank you for that question. And I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with blonde hair, currently wearing a black leather jacket, glasses, and my gold nameplate necklace, because I am from Brooklyn. But my plan to make sure that we are providing healthcare to all New Yorkers, and particularly for people who are in arts and culture, but also gig employees, to ensure that they all have access to our healthcare system. And it is about leveraging all of the programs that are currently in place, particularly the expansion most recently by the Biden administration for the Obamacare that is giving substantial funding for people who have who may not have been able to afford it on the platform, but also leveraging our NYC Cares project that it goes through the Health and Hospitals Corporation. But we need to do more than just ensure that you have health care, that you have insurance, but that you also have access. This is about ensuring that we are expanding H&H across the city, but also helping primary care physicians live and work in those communities. One of the things I've been most passionate about is closing the maternal morbidity gap. It is 8 times more likely if you are Black in New York City to die in labor than it is for someone who is white. And when you talked about Brownsville and the care that they had been providing to that community was so critically important. We need to ensure that there are maternal health care at all of our H&H facilities and all of our private hospitals, particularly midwifery, that we are supporting birth centers, and that women have doulas when they're going through that. But when we think about long haul COVID, we need to make sure that we're also thinking about what that means in terms of that is actually an underlying disability that we need to treat as such for SSI purposes as we move forward. But I am thrilled to be here this evening, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up question, if that's okay with you, and I'm going to take you sort of in a slightly different direction. The University of Pennsylvania's Social Impact on the Arts report shows, and we all have heard this, neighborhoods with vibrant cultural assets see an increase in civic engagement, better health, schooling, personal security, and economic revitalization. In the wake of all of the injustices that have come to bear this past year, what is your approach to budget justice? And how would you address the financial security and protection of cultural assets in communities of color in particular, many of whom were struggling to survive before the pandemic?
Thank you so much for that question. Culture and arts are going to be the leaders on how we come back strong from COVID. It is what is going to keep New Yorkers in New York City. It is what is going to draw tourism back, and it is going to fundamentally drive our economy. I know that a thriving art and culture sector across the city is incredibly important, which is why when I put out my reopen to stay open plan, I specifically called out that we needed more of the public realm available for arts and culture, and to reform our concession permits, particularly to make it easier for small arts institutions to have access. It is also critical that when we look at the city budget, we're funding everyone appropriately. that it's not just the big institutions, but the smaller institutions that actually create a lot of the energy and vibrancy that we see in our neighborhoods that help us really stay strong. But we also need to make sure that we are doing art and culture and theater and dance in our schools. When I think about coming back from COVID and the amount of trauma kids have really endured, I think about the fact that it is art and culture and theater that will help them deal with those traumas. And it's so important to re-engage those kids. But we need to ensure that we are also doing things for those of you who do get city capital money. The bureaucratic challenges of being able to use it have to be fixed. I know that we actually treat you almost like the bank. You know, you go out and borrow money so that you can build something that I said I was going to fund. You know, we as New Yorkers cannot tolerate that. And we have to make sure that we are supporting art and culture, because I honestly believe that is what differentiates us from the rest of the country.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate your responses. Luis.
Sorry, muted. Let's go to our next candidate. It's a question for Art Chang. And Art, thank you for being here. As of March 2021, just 4% of shutter creative businesses have returned to normal operations. The federal relief offered by the shutter venue operators grants will only help around 10% of the creative economy. Micro businesses, the sole proprietor artists, or small artist-led organizations are particularly vulnerable, even with this help. This is a huge loss for our city's economy, for a sector that generates 110 billion in economic activity in arts and culture. What do you foresee is the role of creative economies in supporting economic recovery here in the city, particularly for communities most affected by environmental, housing, and health instability due to COVID, including our aging immigrant and working class communities of color? You could dissect the question in pieces. I know it's a long and I threw a lot at your lap, so go.
That is indeed a kitchen sink question, and I'm delighted to have it. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Art Chang. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am an Asian man with very short black hair, graying at the temples, wearing large clear glasses, and a gray shirt with a button up in the front. Behind me is my fireplace in my study, which is lined with photographs of my two children and my wife. And those photographs are from when they're very young, because now they're 18 and 21. And I like to remember the days when I could pick them up and squeeze them. And then next to it is a painting from a museum show, from an artist show that I sponsored in my office in Soho in 1988, of a brown hand and a white hand clasping. So you ask a very, very important question about, how we're going to bring back some of the most distressed communities in the city, and the role of the creative class in that. I moved to New York City in 1985 because it was a creative capital of New York City, of the world, in fact. And I moved in particular to Brooklyn because Spike Lee was down the street and it was a home of hip hop. New York City has always been the place where creative people could come and prosper until recently. And this is a problem that preceded COVID, and COVID only accelerated. That as the city became less and less affordable, it became increasingly difficult for people who are artists to be able to come here and live. So we need to be able to figure out how we address this question and bring the arts back so it is intrinsic to our culture. There are really 3 steps. We have to stabilize the arts community, we have to expand it, and then we have to sustain it. By stabilize it, we need to keep theaters, especially small theaters, in their stores, in their storefronts, in their buildings. As we know, small theaters and small arts companies are like small businesses. And small businesses represent over 50% of the city's employment, but got very, very little relief. And you are talking about that. Did you? I'm sorry. I saw you. Did you have a question? Did you want to interject?
No, I'll follow up. Please continue.
Okay. So we need to be able to keep these nonprofits in their stores, regardless of the amount of relief that they're getting. We need to expand on things like the Open Culture Initiative to be able to have open culture, not just on the streets, in the specific places that the DOT says, but throughout the entire city in every place that looks like a public space. When theaters open, and theaters must open, the city must enable the theater owners and the producers to open those theaters back up, even with limited seating, in the form of grants and other things to allow the theaters to be able to go forward and keep going and create this impression of New York City as a vibrant cultural place. And then we have an $18 billion in foundation aid funding from the schools, and we need to expand the arts programs in the schools, integrate CUNY into that, which would provide immediate employment for many, many artists. And then we need to sustain it. And I'm proposing that a city that's 10 times the size of Boston should have the proportionate amount of arts districts scattered throughout the city to enable and reinvigorate, especially some of the poor and communities who are ignored.
Let me do a quick follow-up and please be short in your response as we will need to continue to hear from other candidates. But in the 70s, the arts sort of took over a lot of the manufacturing sector, and by design, the city worked to do that. Right after 9/11, it was the downtown area that was reshaped with art and artists. Can you think of, beyond Broadway, what else do we do with the arts in our communities?
I have a proposal in my arts plan on my website to use the underutilized and vacant office spaces right now that are scattered throughout Manhattan and enable those to be repurposed as artist rehearsal spaces and even as digital broadcast spaces for artists who want to do their own productions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Chang.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here.
Anna?
Thank you, Luis. Next, we are going to bring up Avatar Davi.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Avatar Davi.
How are you? It's so wonderful to see you.
So good to meet you. I'm a huge fan of your work with Carmen de la.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Miranda, it's an honor to be on with you guys. You guys have been not only artistic but political leaders for me personally. So it's such an honor to work with, to share this moment with you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to jump right into our question. Educational programs for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated populations that include sustained arts programs has led to improvements in managing emotional states, building confidence and communication skills, and increasing civic engagement. What are your plans for supporting incarcerated and formerly incarcerated New Yorkers?
So before I begin, once again, my name is Avatar Davi. I'm a music artist, choreographer, and candidate for mayor of New York City. I am a brown-skinned individual with coils coming from the crown of my head. I loved how the sister described herself at the beginning. I'm wearing a white shirt and a jacket that has a texture to it that's very reflective and fun. So the specific question is around incarceration. I want to give a kind of panoramic view of my approach to mayorship. And since this is the arts and culture conversation, I thought I'd bring some art to help explain. So I made a little book. It's called NYC Meet Avatar Davi. My name is pronounced Davi. D-A-H-V-E is kind of an easy way to kind of think of it. I am a choreographer. I've choreographed for the likes of Kerry Washington, David Allen Greer. I've done music tours, music videos. After that, I released my first album called Garcia. I toured with that album in New York. I headlined at Brooklyn Museum twice, as well as the Black National Theater of Harlem. I'm so grateful to share this moment with them as well. After that, I discovered that the music industry wasn't reflective of my
Avatar. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me just jump in real quickly, because we only have 90 seconds and you've just gone through the first 90 seconds. I wasn't sure
if we were doing the longer, because I saw people doing longer.
Yes, so it's a little bit, it's tight. So go ahead and we'll start the clock and go ahead. This is my follow-up. So my follow-up is the question that I just asked, which is educational programs for incarcerated people. I'll repeat it very quickly. And formerly incarcerated populations that include sustained arts programs has led to improvements in managing emotional states, building confidence and communication skills, and increasing civic engagement. What are your plans? As mayor, what are your plans for supporting incarcerated and formerly incarcerated New Yorkers? So that'll be my follow-up question to give you an extra 90 minutes, an extra 90 seconds. Go ahead.
I also cannot see the timer, so that's another thing. So first off, New York City statehood. I am proposing that we create a new charter that says that we as New York City are in line for becoming a city state. And with that, we increase voter representation nationally, as well as in resource allocation. 2, equal salaries through a program called Earth Order. Earth Order is going to be like a cryptocurrency that you have on your phone that provides you your salary for what you agreed to work to, what business you agreed to work to. We have so much potential, so many people in the city who have great ideas but do not get funding. So what we are experiencing is a flip of what is necessary in our capital. What we need to do is replace the power back into the human hands and say the businesses prove to the workers that what they are doing is important. And so the businesses, so the workers then empower businesses that are important in society. And so society is shaped by our New York City community and not by corporations. And then finally, creating a compost and recycling program that will green the city. Specifically for incarcerated individuals, we need to, we have a very difficult understanding of how to appreciate and love each other. And so I think we have kind of like this criminal mentality. As soon as someone is criminalized, they can no longer vote, they can no longer have access to many of these.
Thank you, Avatar. I'm sorry to cut you off, but thank you.
So sorry.
It's okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate your response. Thank you. We have to keep everything moving forward so we make sure everybody equally has time. So we're going to quickly bring back Paperboy Prince. Are you ready? Hello.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's our time.
It's good to see you. So we're going to you've got 90 seconds for my question, and if we have time, we'll do a follow-up. Okay. So here's my question. The city has a qualified legion of teaching artists, totaling over 4,500 educators. Yet 67% of New York City principals stated that funding for the arts is generally insufficient. Currently, New York City does not meet state mandates for arts in every public school. Yet arts education in schools, we know this, arts education in schools has been shown to improve academic and social emotional outcomes for students, especially when provided as an integrated part of the curriculum. Here's your question. What is your plan for the city school system? And what is your vision of the role that arts in education plays? You've got 90 seconds. Go ahead.
Paper, yeah. It's our time. One love. My name is Paperboy Prince, Paperboy Love Prince, an artist, activist, and athlete running for mayor, probably the premier artist running for mayor of New York City. And what I want to say to your question is this. You know, we focus a lot on education instead of intelligence, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, artistic intelligence. So for me, part of my plan is to move away from this education of us telling you what to do, of the city, of the state, of the government, kind of brainwashing our youth in a lot of ways. If you look at the education system and things that we were taught, and focusing more on intelligence. As far as getting arts back in school, we have the most vibrant artist community in the world, and we're not leveraging that currently. I have tons of artist friends that I get to work with, that I get to see. We're talking about graffiti artists, rappers, dancers, musicians, performance artists. We need to make it easier for these artists to be able to display their work in school and talk about their works in the schools as well. You know, for artists to have an opportunity to perform and to educate and provide intelligence and knowledge in schools, there's a lot of red tape they have to go through, because our children are very precious, and we want to make sure we have the right people checking in with them. But
thank you. Thank you so much. Our 90 seconds are up. Thank you so much for your response to your question. I appreciate you joining us.
Paper, yeah. One
Thank
love.
you.
More
Thank
art,
you.
more love. Thank you so much.
Luis, you're on mute.
Thank you for being with us. We heard from many candidates. We're gonna take a quick music break to help us digest the info we have gotten from the candidates for mayor that we have heard from. And now we are back. We have heard from 5 mayoral candidates so far. We're going to hear from a few more in this segment, and it's up to the many of you who are listening in the various platforms, including this Zoom, to then make a final decision as to who's your candidate for mayor. Anna?
Yes, and this year we get to choose 5 candidates in ranked choice voting. So just put down your top 5 choices in the order you want them.
And rather than us trying to explain what ranked choice is, it's a new system that we're going to be using here in New York City. And we urge you to go to vote.nyc to find out more. Now let's go to our next slate of candidates. And here is Diane Morales. Is Diane with us?
Looks like Luis. Do we have Diane? Okay, so let's keep moving forward then. Let's bring up Mr. Eric Adams. Mr. Adams, are you able to join us?
Yes.
Starting.
How are you, sir?
Good, good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Good to see you as well.
How are you? How are all of you doing?
Thank you. So we're hanging in. We're hanging in there. So we're going to jump right into the question.
Yes.
As of March 2021, just 4% of shuttered creative businesses have returned to normal operations. The federal relief offered by the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant will only help an estimated 10% of the creative economy. Micro businesses, i.e. the sole proprietor artists or small artist-led organizations, are particularly vulnerable. This is a huge loss for our city's economy, where the creative sector generates $110 billion in economic activity. Arts and culture have led recoveries in the past, enlivening the hollowed out industrial neighborhoods in the 70s and bringing people back downtown after 9/11. Here's the question. What do you foresee is the role of creative economies in supporting economic recovery in New York City, particularly in communities most affected by environmental, housing, and health instability due to COVID-19, including our aging, immigrant, and working class communities of color?
Thank you for that. And also so that Diane also joined again, if you want to call her on. Let's be clear, the funding from the city cultural institutions have never really been fair, particularly for those small cultural institutions scattered throughout our city. And it's no secret that these were the same communities that were hardest hit by COVID. And we need to rethink how we think about our cultural institutions throughout this entire city. They play more than a role of a place where people entertain. They're part of how do we get over the vicarious trauma that we experience from COVID-19. That is why during the Great Depression, you saw the federal government allocate almost $400 million, equivalent of $400 million to the cultural upliftment in the cities. And so I believe it's crucial that not only do we use the direct stimulus, but that we flatline the funding to the various cultural institutions throughout the city, build it into our educational system, make sure that we use some of the NYC company dollars because you boost tourism based on what you're doing. And so we need to really tie it into also our mental health, how we're going to deal with mental health in the city.
Thank you so much for that response, Mr. Adams. I know that you and many of the candidates have very busy schedules. We are going to pull up Ms. Morales. If you are able to stay with us, we can certainly bring you back later in the segment for a follow-up, but I understand that we appreciate how much you are scattering across this city to speak to constituents. So thank you very much.
Thank you very
Luis,
much.
I'll toss it to you, Ms. Morales.
Hi, Diane. Our
Hi.
next question is for Diane Morales. Ms. Morales, in the COVID crisis, arts and culture were the first to close, and much of the sector has not reopened, and whatever has reopened in a very small way. More than 50% of artists and culture workers remain unemployed. This is a sector where workers are 3.6 times more likely to be self-employed, freelancers, gig workers, and mixed income earners. Here is the question. What is your plan for getting the city back to work, particularly in hardest hit sectors like this? And what kind of workforce development programs do you envision can provide access to communities of color and people with disabilities?
Thank you for the excellent question. So first I want to apologize for just not having a lot of time and the confusion on the time. Thank you so much for your flexibility, and thank you to Eric. Diane Morales, she, her, ella. I am a curly-haired Afro-Latina wearing a light shirt and a dark blazer. I think this is a great question. One of the things I want to say that I think is important is that we have to prioritize no matter what in this current situation where we are still in the midst of a public health crisis. We have to prioritize keeping people alive. And that to me means making sure that we provide people, particularly our most vulnerable people in the arts and cultural sector who we know have been experienced a lot of economic insecurity. We have to provide economic security for people to be able to stay home and stay safe while we gradually reopen in a safe way that prioritizes, again, always saving people's lives. So from an economic perspective, I think investing in people being able to be home if they don't have a job and stay safe and alive is critical. The second thing is, from a reopening and reinvesting perspective, I am a strong proponent. Everything in my platform talks about the lens of equity and justice and prioritizing the communities that have been hardest hit and the communities that have historically been the most vulnerable. So that means prioritizing the return of folks who have been hardest hit by ensuring that they have access to the vaccine and beginning the reopening process by supporting the sector, small businesses, small theaters, small companies. First, that would be the priority under my administration, which would seek to create a new economy that would prioritize those businesses.
Ms.
Yes.
Morales, let me do a follow-up.
Sure.
In terms of the kind of workforce development programs that you believe are necessary to be implemented if you were to become mayor.
Sure. So there's a couple of big major prongs to this. One is that I've called for a Green New Deal for New York City. I think we need to create a seamless K through 16 system with a heavy emphasis on training people to be able to enter the workforce in the jobs required to make New York City a green New York City, right? So that means investing at this point in time, not employing an austerity budget. The other thing that I will say specific to the sector here is that I'm a big believer in the role that arts and culture play both in healing and in learning. My daughter had a learning disability, and it wasn't until she discovered musical theater that she actually began to flourish as a student. It opened up an entire world for her and helped her see herself in ways that she had not before. The second thing I'll say is in terms of healing, we've got to recognize that our communities, the most vulnerable communities, are suffering greatly as a result of this. Mental health issues will be significant, and the role that arts and culture can play in supporting the journey to healing and moving out, arts therapy, those are things that I'm a big believer in and a big proponent in, and I would support workforce development in that way as well.
Ms. Morales, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Next, we'd like to bring up Mr. Ray McGuire. Hello, Mr. McGuire.
I am here. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Am I supposed to tell you what I have on?
Please do.
I have on a white shirt, a blue hoodie, and a blue jacket. And I am at home in the art world. How are you doing? How's DTH doing?
We're doing well. We're hanging in there. Thank you so much for asking. I'm going to jump right into the question. The city has a qualified legion of teaching artists totaling over 4,500, goodness gracious, educators. Yet 67% of New York City principals stated that funding for the arts is generally insufficient. Currently, New York City does not meet state mandates for arts in every public school. We know that arts education in schools has been shown to improve academic and social emotional outcomes for students, especially when provided as an integrated part of the curriculum. Mr. McGuire, what is your plan for the city's school system? And what is your vision that the role that arts and education plays?
So let me be clear. I'm delighted to be here. It is likely that I have been involved in more arts education, arts and cultural institutions than all the other candidates combined. I began my involvement in the art world probably 3 decades ago. I have served on at least 12 to 15 boards of directors, from Harlem School of the Arts to Arts Connection to the Whitney Museum to the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Museum of Natural History. So I am deeply invested in the world of arts. Arts are essential. We have not invested in the arts education from the start. When we decreased the amount of funds, we took that opportunity away. We need to reinvest. And I will be a mayor who does what he has done for the past 3 decades, and that is invest in and celebrate the arts, recognizing that arts are essential to our students. Arts are essential to our parents. Arts are essential to our communities, and arts are essential to New York City. I am delighted to be here to talk about the arts.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do a quick follow-up question. I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
In the
It's
wake
art,
of
so
it's art. We improvise.
let's be
right?
creative. Let us be creative. Yes.
Here we go. In the wake of all the injustices that have come to bear this year, what is your approach to budget justice? How would you address the financial security and protection of cultural assets in communities of color? And I'm also going to ask you this question, which, like, as you're addressing this question, I'd like for you to talk to us about equitable plans of distribution for funds to organizations of color, artists of color. So if you could speak a little bit about that.
Sure. I have been invested in equitable distribution and institutions of art and arts education, as I said, from the Harlem School of the Arts with the great Betty Allen, early supporter of Dance Theater of Harlem, when Thera Ward was one of the great dancers. And it goes on and on. Alvin Ailey. So if you think about the arts institutions in which I've been invested, we need to make certain from a city's perspective that not only do we invest in the 34 cultural institutions group, but that we invest in the local organizations. Those are many of the lifebloods of our community. This is where you have many of the emerging artists. I guess some call them struggling artists, but the emerging artists in whom we need to invest. So a more equitable distribution would be identify those emerging cultural institutions where arts education and arts and culture are thriving, and invest in those organizations as well. So we need to make certain that we keep the ones that we have thriving. And we also need to make certain that as we go into the boroughs, that we celebrate art in the boroughs and share some of the gifts and resources that exist in Manhattan, need to share them into the boroughs. I can envision, as I have in my comeback equity plan, to have a arts festival starting in June of 2022, celebrating artists for a year, having 1,000 artists that we incentivize, creating an artist zone to make sure that we support those artists in a city that's become too damn expensive, to make sure we bring the stagehands back, that we take the art into the community, that we celebrate art fairs, and that we make certain that we invest in arts education. So I will more equitably distribute, focus on those organizations that are in the boroughs, especially the small and emerging ones. We need to celebrate those, and we need to celebrate the emerging artists and support them however and wherever and whenever we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that thoughtful response. Luis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anna. Next, we're going to welcome Thomas Downs. Do we have?
Should I excuse myself now? Ray McGuire signing off?
Yes. Yes, Mr.
Thank you.
McGuire. Thank you.
Thank you for having me,
with
great
us.
one. Thank you. Great to be with you.
Mr. Downs, I want to ask you, as you know, healthcare, it's a very pressing issue for artists, cultural workers, cultural groups, particularly small cultural groups, without resources for big coverage plans. This impacts disabled workers, and organizations. In addition, many people are now experiencing difficulties after suffering with COVID. And in communities hardest hit by COVID health, outlets are closing. For instance, in Brownsville in Brooklyn, there has been recent closure announcements for family and women's health clinic. What is your plan to address the healthcare needs of the city's Menis community and of artists in particular?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. My name is Thomas Downs. I'm a black man with short black hair, a black suit jacket, white shirt, blue tie, and am in front of a beige kind of, what would you call that? Like a wall-ish. And I'm 18 years old. When it comes to the city and when it comes to the people of the city, I think we really need to acknowledge that healthcare is a right that is deserved by all, and especially with people who are artists and typically might be between jobs or are working on a self-employed passion that may or may not involve some sort of healthcare plan. It's important that the city then steps up to the plate to provide not only healthcare, but healthcare services as well, such as better hospitals, more access to healthcare providers via the internet. Would that be an option? Along with more clinics in the neighborhood to allow for the easy access of healthcare for people. And when it comes to actually meeting that goal, we need to provide a service for people to have healthcare to not only use city hospitals and city clinics, but private hospitals as well, and create a cooperation with them to ensure that no matter where you are in this city, you can receive adequate healthcare. I would also want to work with small businesses in the city that may or may not want to join on to a payroll provider's healthcare plan that may be expensive to employees and expensive to the owners, and instead also offer them the benefit of using the city's healthcare program, which I would plan on expanding to allow for more people to have better quality healthcare, a more equitable access to healthcare, especially when it comes to our communities of color and communities of low income.
Thank you. Let me do a follow-up. We have seen that artists continue not to have health plans, health coverage, and as a result, it's difficult for them to access health care. Can you share any thoughts about how do we do with this and other vulnerable populations that are experiencing lack of healthcare coverage?
Well, lack of healthcare coverage, especially in this city, can be a very scary thing. The idea that you can get hit by a car and then be charged a tens of thousands of dollar hospital bill and even $1,000 ambulance bill is absurd. And with those vulnerable communities, especially artists, I would create programs to directly reach out to them through their means on social media or just in person, set up actual people on the street to help people sign up for a new city healthcare program that would enable them to have access to public private hospitals to lower what costs may be incurred, just like a normal healthcare program. And when it comes to city hospitals, people without healthcare and people who are below a certain income threshold would not be expected to pay the same, if anything at all, to access that healthcare. And when it comes to artists who would be struggling to find healthcare and who may be deterred to go see a doctor for a regular checkup, I would want that to be covered in that plan as well. Because regular checkups and regular screenings are really the preventative measures that help to stop a major issue from forming and really help to experience and see what needs to be done before you're in the ER with some emergency that they're trying to look at what they need to fix. And with that, I would want to ensure that artists not only have that healthcare, but feel comfortable seeing their doctors, going to an emergency room and not worrying about getting a giant bill that they're not going to be able to afford at the end of the day, and ensuring that New York City is healthy, that it's safe, and that healthcare becomes a right that everyone does have access to equally and not just for the wealthy in this city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Downs, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to make sure that we have Mr. Fernando Mateo with us. Do we have Mr.
Yes,
Mateo?
I'm here. How are you, Luis?
Let me ask you, Mr. Mateo, educational programs for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated populations that include sustained arts programs have led to improvement in managing emotional states, building confidence, and communication skills, and increasing civic engagement. What are your plans for supporting incarcerated and formerly incarcerated New Yorkers using the arts as a vehicle for that transformation?
Luis, thank you for the question. My name is Fernando Mateo. I am wearing a navy blue jacket with a pink and white striped shirt. Behind me is a wonderful painting from Domingo Zapata, a Spanish artist. And I'm sitting right now at home. I rushed here from Staten Island to make sure that I wouldn't miss this. And I'm honored and I'm humbled to be here. Anna, thank you. Well, listen, I spent 3 years at Rikers Island teaching, training, and employing first-time nonviolent offenders. I realized that the opportunities that our jail system lacks is what causes recidivism. So in those 3 years, I was able to teach different skills: carpentry, plumbing, electrical, carpet laying, telecommunications. And when these kids came out of jail, we were able to connect them with a job with the unions. The unions then took them on and put them through school, and they graduated, and 95% of them did not return to jail. I'm a firm believer that New York City has the largest detention center in the world, and it's underutilized. There's so much land there and so much space there that you can build cultural centers for the arts, for artists, for actors, for all kinds of things. So if we're able to take these kids that are nonviolent and are going through a transition period in their life, and you're able to teach them something that might interest them, whether it's in the arts or whether it's vocational training, they will be a different person when they come out. I had the pleasure of doing that, and the experience I had at Rikers Island was tremendous. So I believe that if our city, when I am mayor, I will engage corporate America. I will engage small businesses. I will engage arts and cultural centers. I will engage everyone and anyone that can give a 14 to 18-year-old kid a part-time job after school. I believe that that's when you turn their lives around, simply because it happened to me. When I was 14, I dropped out of school. I was adopted by a Jewish family who taught me something, taught me the values of hard work. And I believe that that same opportunity we should give to our kids when they're in jail or if they're not in jail.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mateo. Thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your experiences and your platform.
I was hoping for a follow-up question.
Well, I think you covered the follow-up questions as well, because you included the art as part of, you talked about the trade and also talk about the art. So thank you very much.
I believe that vocational training and the arts go hand in hand. Not every kid is going to go to college. Not every kid is going to do what their parents want them to do. But if we give them the opportunity, they can do tremendous things. And by the way, I want you to know that I've known you for so many years. What you have done with your son, with your family, with everything that you've done up in the Heights, I appreciate and I thank you for all of your hard work. Anna, thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, I believe we're taking a break. We have been talking about arts and culture, so let's enjoy some of what our sector creates and produces, thanks to host organization Flushing Town Hall for providing space for this transforming musical performance. We'll be back with the final 6 mayoral candidates after this brief, brilliant performance from Baban Chinese Music Society.
Wow. Thank you, Baban Chinese Music Society, and to Flushing Town Hall, who hosted the performance. All right, everybody, raise your hand, virtual world, who missed Live's performance? I missed live performance. That was stunning. Thank you so much. Luis.
Yes, let's go to our next candidate. We have 4 candidates in this third segment of our forum. Scott Stringer, Mr. Stringer, I had seen him checking mic. Is he here? Yes, here he is. How are you, Mr. Stringer?
Hi, Luis. How are you? Anna, hi.
In this COVID crisis, arts and culture were the first to close, and much of the sector it's still closed or open at a minimum level of capacity. More than 50% of artists and culture workers remain unemployed. You will know that this sector workers are 3.6 times more likely to be self-employed. They're freelancers, gig workers, and mixed income earners. What is your plan for getting the city back to work, particularly in hardest hit sectors like this? And what kind of workforce development programs do you envision can foster communities of color and people with disabilities?
Well, first of all, let me just say to all of you, it's great to be on tonight to talk about these critical issues relating to arts and culture. I'm told that I should give, if this is okay, release a response so that each person knows me. So can I do that?
Yes, please. And we want to know for you to describe yourself.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm Scott Stringer. I'm the New York City Controller, and I use the he and him pronouns. I am pale-skinned with salt and pepper hair, more salt, but I like to say more pepper. I have glasses. I'm wearing a dark blue suit jacket and a white shirt. I'm at my computer in my 2-bedroom apartment. There are pictures of my family behind me. There's also a framed Barbara Kruger Metro card from the 2017 partnership between Performer and the MTA. And there's also a Stringer for Mayor poster in the background. And so I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for hosting me. And let me just say to all of you, there can be no recovery in this city without our arts and culture community. What we've seen in this city pre-pandemic was the reality of a 3.4% unemployment rate in this city. When you think back to pre-COVID, we had COVID and suddenly we had 20% of our people unemployed, 25% people of color, And in the arts and culture community, we were devastated and shut down.
And Mr. Stringer, can you talk a little bit about the plan, your plan to get the city back to work?
Well, I believe that the communities that were hardest hit by COVID needs a mayor who's going to make the opening last. We're still $600,000 jobs down. And what I would do immediately is invest $1 billion in stimulus for small businesses that will go to arts and nonprofits and for-profit organizations to get everyone back on their feet. I also want to jumpstart the reopening of arts and culture. The city should purchase 250,000 tickets and launch a massive public works program for artists and public art. We also have to recognize that our city will be changed by COVID and some jobs aren't coming back. And Luis, to your point about job training and retraining, as mayor, I'm going to work to make CUNY free, and I'm going to invest in a wholesale workforce development strategy focused on micro-credentialing and on bringing people into our green economy in the future, whether it's retrofitting jobs, whether it's looking at how we can make sure that our arts and culture community can come back through the kind of stimulus investment we need. This is going to be an all hands on deck moment. And let me tell you why arts and culture has to be the center of recovery, because it's interrelated with bringing our hotels back, bringing back our mom and pop stores. There can be no economic recovery in our communities unless we come to terms with the challenges we face with arts and culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stringer, for spending some time with us tonight.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And let's continue with our next candidate. I understand that Shawn Donovan is already with us. How are
Luis,
you?
it's great to see you.
Nice seeing you, Mr. Donovan. After you describe yourself, this is the question that we will want you to tackle. As of last month, only 4% of shutter creative businesses had actually returned to normal operations. The federal relief offered some help, but only really to 10% of the creative economy. Micro businesses, those that have sole proprietor artists and small artist companies are not operating. Huge loss to the city for a sector that generates $110 billion of economic activity. What do you foresee is the role of creative economies in supporting economic recovery in New York City, particularly for communities most affected by all of the challenges and the instability due to COVID, and for populations that are vulnerable, and particularly communities of color?
So Luis, wonderful to be with you all tonight. I am a light-skinned man with very clear glasses, increasingly gray hair, a gray jacket with a light blue shirt, and a somewhat dark painting in the background by an architect named Michael Graves that many people mistake for a map in the background. So that's a little bit about me. And I want to just say, I am so glad that we are having this conversation tonight, because arts and culture is at the center of what makes New York, New York, and it is the center of our recovery. You ask about the creative economy and how it can particularly help communities that we so often leave behind. And I think we immediately have to go to work, Luis, making sure that we're putting artists back to work, filling our vacant storefronts with small-scale performances, with galleries and openings, filling our public spaces. And we need a city that makes it much easier for our artists to get to work, to find those spaces, and to ensure that that is the spark for our recovery. What I would also say is that no one in this race is better able to go to work with President Biden, Vice President Harris, to make sure that the aid that's coming from Washington gets directly to our artists and performers, to our cultural institutions, particularly the smaller ones, because of my work as budget director for President Obama. But also I understand the role that arts and the creative economy play, particularly in communities that have been left behind so long. Because
let me ask you, Mr. Donovan, a follow-up and connect it back to the original question. We know that the dollars that we're getting from the federal stimulus, probably it's touching 10%. How do we help the rest, the smaller artist groups and individual artists and micro businesses?
Absolutely. And the way we do it is the type of work that I've done again and again in crisis in those same communities. We need to partner with communities to make sure that, for example, we are creating unemployment assistance and other programs that get directly to artists that are too often cut out of those benefits. We need to partner with nonprofits that have the relationships and can make it much easier to apply for those benefits. And we need a coordinated strategy, as I led with Rocco Landesman when he led the National Endowment for the Arts, to bring philanthropies on programs like Artworks that I helped create and others that really supported those creative communities. And we should make sure that we're creating a system, a digital system, to allow all arts organizations to better utilize spaces, to apply for permits and to apply for benefits, so that every New Yorker knows where those arts communities are around the city and can better access them while they're accessing those benefits as well. Those are all things that are parts of my arts and culture plan, which is on ShawnForNYC.com, and would love all of you to go look at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donovan. Thank you for taking some of your time. We know that you all are very busy people, going from one corner to the city to the next corner of the city. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Anna?
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.
Now we're going to bring up Vitali Filipchenko. Vitali, are you with us still?
Yes, I'm listening.
Hello. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to jump right into the question. Educational programs for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated populations that include sustained arts programs has led to improvements in managing emotional states, building confidence and communication skills, and increasing civic engagement. Vitali, here's the question. What are your plans for supporting incarcerated and formerly incarcerated New Yorkers?
Okay, my name is Vitali Filipchenko. I'm Russian American, 47 years old, Caucasian, white, pronoun him, white shirt with a blue sign, Vitali for mayor. I'm a small business owner and immigrant. For this question, I will tell you, most of the COVID-19, they hit small business owners and immigrants. I'm represent all of them. I'm not like other candidates with high level payroll and really warm chair in the office. I'm exactly on the street working with the people. I'm struggling with my business. I understand exactly how immigrants survive and what we need more important in New York City. First of all, most of the topic, it's a forum for people who are struggling. First of all, I want to create the clinics. The city will build the clinics. When you build the clinics, who like city owns these clinics, where are you going to get employers? People who just released from a prison, people who struggle and don't have jobs, because I'm tired. We live in capitalism, and most of the profitable clinics owned by private owners. City didn't own anything, and I want to create it exactly as a clinic city owns. We can create the health for low-income people, for artists, for students who just released after college, and to build these clinics. First of all, construction job. Second of all, we're going to get own doctors, because city gonna own. They want to decide what's the price. We're going to put it on the bill. Second of all, we're going to change the view in New York City, because New York City, look, all the similars like trash cans or streets, they're not designed correctly. We got tons of artists who can get the paid for idea. And I love art because my daughter, when she came here, was 13. She got 3 classes, MoMA, Met Museum, Queens Museum. And when she could get it in the college, they were so like, oh, you were so active, you love art.
Thank you, Vitali.
And she was get welcome. And yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, it's 90 seconds and this 90 seconds goes by quickly. So thank you for that, your response. I do want to ask a follow-up. And I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction. And this is from the chat on YouTube, our YouTube watchers. Governor's Island is becoming an arts mecca. Do we preserve its history or build on it as de Blasio has proposed? What are your thoughts on this and why?
First of all, mayor is just representative position. For me, I cannot decide what exactly I'm going to ask the people who know better the situation, artists who live there, and we can make a decision what's better for everyone. Because all these broken promises, people tire from New York. It's just like, I got this plan. I got this plan on my website. No, I'm going to talk to the people, get the meeting, real meeting. You're going to ask like, guys, you live longer, we're smarter, you got more experience. Please help me with advice. We can get better solution. Because from the people to the people. That's my solution.
Excellent. Thank you for that response. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for inviting me, guys.
You're so welcome. All righty, everyone. We are now at the last candidate for the evening. I am going to bring up Stacey Pressman. Stacey.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome, Stacey. I'm going to jump right into the question and let you have the clock, okay? So here's the question. Healthcare is a pressing issue for individual artists, cultural workers, and small cultural groups without resources for major coverage plans. This impacts disabled artists, workers, and organizations enormously. In addition, many people are experiencing disabilities after suffering from COVID. And in communities hardest hit by COVID-19, health outlets are closing. For instance, in Brownsville and Brooklyn, there have been recent closure announcements of a long-standing family and women's health clinic. So here's the question, Stacey. What is your plan to address the healthcare needs of the city's many communities?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. My name is Stacey. I'm a dark-haired woman with olive skin and glasses, wearing a black shirt, a blue background with a little plant behind me, a Kate Bush mug, and a pinkish kind of weird pattern blazer. So that's what I'm wearing. So let's get to the question. Healthcare. We are coming out of this, into this with a horrible health crisis, both with our healthcare system. I just left the hospital with a sick mother with a COVID scare. The hospital is overcrowded. As an actor myself in Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA, I've been having my own issues with healthcare for years. We need to make sure that people that need healthcare get healthcare, period, and that's it. No more effing around. And I'm gonna cut to the chase because this is my own experience and this hits me very, very personally. We have healthcare barons in the city where there's no hospitals. I want to build more hospitals. I was just in a hospital. They were overwhelmed. My mother waited 3 days in an emergency room. That is unacceptable. We're in New York City, supposedly the best city in the world. We need to build more healthcare places, clinics, specifically smaller places that are maybe specifically geared to specific issues. We're going to have post-COVID issues as well that we need to be prepared for. Those long-termers that are here, not just people that have suffered from COVID and are better, but there are people that are now suffering from disabilities from healthcare. So we need to make sure those accesses to the communities are there. We need to make sure that inoculations can be brought to people into their homes that cannot leave their homes. And that is also very important.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm going to ask a very quick follow-up and I'm going to take you in a very different direction, okay? So the arts and culture sector is still seeing unemployment rates higher than many other industries, as you well know. And you also know that arts and culture is a significant economic driver for the city and a jobs multiplier. And yet, you know, the relief that this sector is seeing is more inclined to trickle-down economy-based thinking. So, Stacey, I'm not a big fan of Monday morning quarterbacking. But as mayor, what would you have done differently? Seeing that the arts and culture sector is still languishing, what would you have done?
What I would have done differently, I would have created a system. First of all, to get it took 4 months to get unemployment benefits for the gig economy I've been living in forever. What I would have done better, first of all, we should have I would create, as mayor, an art advocacy center in my mayor's office, because we have very specific needs as artists that don't get met. That's first of all. Second of all, I would have created a system once we got everything safe to end the lockdowns so people could open safely and so businesses could come back and thriving. I would make sure that artists are getting the benefits they so justly deserve. And I would have made sure that there's housing stability, like creating systems like the Mitchell Lama project, which works so great. Like we have Manhattan Plaza. We need much more of Manhattan Plazas in the city. So that's some of the things I would have done. I wish I had more time, but that's definitely where I would go with it.
Thank you so much for that response, Stacey. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. Luis.
Thank you, Anna. We have to thank all the candidates who joined us. And it has been a pleasure moderating with you.
It has been such an honor to moderate with you as well, Luis. Such a wonderful, wonderful evening. And I see Lucy has joined us. Lucy, shall we give you the last word for the evening?
You can give me the last word, because what I want to say is thank you. Thank you, Anna Glass of Dance Theater of Harlem. Thank you, Luis Miranda. You have been fantastic hosts for us. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who joined us, not only the candidates, but also everyone who is watching. It's such an important election for us. We're doing this mayoral forum. New Yorkers for Culture and Arts is also doing city council forums, because so much of the city council will turn over, and we really have to engage and vote in June. I want to make sure to thank our ASL interpreters, Brandon Kazan-Maddox and Andrea Alefi. I want to thank my team, all of whom are working artists who produced this so beautifully and worked so hard on it. Melanie Green, Lori Berg, Tara Sheena, and Regine Peters. And lastly, SFG Productions, which helped us host the Zoom. Take care, everyone. Be vote. And again, thanks so much.